Hey folks, Nothing Man here. I'm going to do a video. I'm really trying to stay out of politics, or at least take a break from it, because to be honest with you, the whole thing, everything, there really is nothing taking place in politics today that can even remotely be considered positive. And I've just been inundated, completely encompassed by the negativity, and it does affect me. In my moment to moment life, even day to day, it's just disgusting. But I've been trying to stay back, which is why you guys aren't finding a lot of videos, a lot of content from me. I'm hoping to change that and maybe spin off into a couple different directions. But today I want to talk about this article that I found in Newsweek. First thing I want to do is I want to make one thing absolutely 100% clear. I'm not going to permit anyone, I haven't permitted anyone through all of this to paint me with the broad stroke of their brush and label me as a Trump supporter. I will come out in the open and admit that I voted for him both times. The first time I felt absolutely sick. Because I voted for the first time in my entire life. I voted in a presidential election for one of the two parties, and also for the first time in my life, I voted against somebody rather than for somebody. So that much being said, I'm not sure why I feel the need to defend myself, because at the end of the day, those who don't want to believe me aren't going to believe me anyway. But the reason I voted for Trump the first time was because I was voting against Hillary. With that, I decided to try and take a look at the best things that stood to happen, to take place with the Trump presidency. And the thing that stood out for me was getting away from the swinging of the pendulum from left to right, from Democrat to Republic, going back and forth, never accomplishing a goddamn thing. So I fell in love with the idea of draining the swamp. However, when it came to voting for him the second time, it was almost exactly like the first time. With our current system, I didn't think that he was going to accomplish anything in 4 years, and I didn't think that he was going to accomplish enough in 8 years. This country has been fucked for so long that no president is going to do anything in one term, or even two. Nothing significant. And then the way that the system's set up is that the next president can come in and just wipe it all out. Our country is screwed. So, really, I think that's the reason why I fell in love with the whole drain the swamp idea. So either way, like I said, in defense of myself, I'm not going to be labeled a Trump supporter. I'll tell you what I am, and that is an anti-current government person. I don't like our current government. I think our current government is a sham, is a shame, it's a joke. And anything that can go to fixing that, whether you want to, by any stretch, it needs addressed, it needs fixed, because it's definitely just that screwed up. But anyway, so with that being said, I am happy to hear that he's been acquitted. And I know that this is going to irritate people that I care about, and a lot of the stuff that I think and say and post in these videos goes against a lot of people that I care about, and that's not lost on me. However, I do feel strongly enough about the things that I think and feel, and I do put enough work, put enough effort, enough research in to feel like that there's some substance and some meat to my current beliefs. But I wanted to, the thing that caught my attention that prompted me to do this video today is this article in Newsweek. As everyone expected, there was going to be a lot of news on this acquittal. Backtracking to that, I'm glad he was acquitted. Because the whole thing, again, was a sham. The second acquittal, second impeachment attempt. Just think about the amount of money and time time is one thing. That's something I thought about with both of these impeachment trials. Is isn't there important things that should be on the table? There are, and every single moment that passed for these two sham impeachment trials was putting real issues for us, real issues for our country on hold. For that alone, our representatives, our senators, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And the mere fact that not enough people stood up to say this is ridiculous, that just goes to show how out of touch our government is with this country, with this country's people, and with this country's causes. Again, I really don't have a whole lot good to say about the current state of our government. But anyway, I'm glad that he was acquitted. The amount of time and money that was wasted on this, they should be ashamed of themselves. Each and every one of you as a voter, hopefully a voter, should remember that each time that these names come up on their ballot. And we'll get into that a little bit more as I get into this article. But this article that was brought up featured Louisiana State Senator Bill Cassidy, and how he was one of the Republicans that broke from the Republican Party and voted for Trump's impeachment. Let's see, before I go any further here, I want to run through the list. One of the first things I did after reading this article is I wanted to see exactly which one of these Republicans, how many of them, and there were 7. So the 7 of them were Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. His term currently is set to end in 2027. So he's going to be in there for a while, and we're probably going to have to deal with this type of leadership, this type of decision making for 6 more years. That's pretty scary stuff, something to consider about what we're dealing with. The next in line was Richard Burr from North Carolina. He announced in 2016 that he's not seeking re-election, but that was in 2016. So keep an eye on that one. We'll see, Susan Collins from Maine. She's another one. Her term is not set to end until 2027. Again, having to deal with this sort of decision making for that long is I've always been, for as long as I can remember, a big proponent for term limits. If not term limits, term reform, because these people, once they're in office, they way too frequently do they turn from the principles that got them there. A politician will tell you anything that you want to hear, and they'll make things sound good to get themselves voted by you into office. But once they're there, are they really representing you? I think that's something that I can tell you for myself. I've looked over the years, and I'm really cynical. So it may or may not be considered fair, but of the times that I've looked at it, their campaign made a lot of really nice points, really good stuff. But when it came to putting their nose to the grind and getting work done, not only did they very rarely achieve the things that they platformed on, campaigned on, but a lot of times the ideas behind them, what they ended up doing, were just not indicative of their campaign, not representative of the people that actually voted and put them in there. So again, like I said, 6 more years, you're going to be dealing with guys like Cassidy and ladies like Susan Collins from Maine. Next on the list was Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. That was a little bit disappointing because I tend to think of Alaska as a little bit more of a conservative, a real hearty conservative state. So it was a little bit surprising for me to see that one. She's up, actually. She's going to face the re-election in 2022. I don't want to say too much about her because, like I said, I don't know a lot, but it was just, like I said, disappointing because I'd like to think that there are some real heartfelt conservatives, people who, if we can't count, I'll tell you this, like I said, I'm not a Republican. I have never really supported the Republican Party per se, but at a time like this, if we can't count on the Republican Party to be conservative in the face of what the Democrats have been doing for all of the last 4 or 5 years and what they're really digging their heels in for right now, we need conservatives to stand up, and this is not how you do it. I understand this is a separate issue, this impeachment thing, but it does still go into, and I'm hoping what this does is if my words, if my appeal to people can do anything, it's hopefully to encourage people to keep an eye on things like this. And I know it can be time consuming and stressful and whatnot, but it really is that important to keep your eye on things in our government, because, if you allow people to, I saw a quote here earlier, I don't remember if it was today or yesterday, it said that somebody had said that we need to quit referring to our politicians as leaders, and it was in quotation marks. And it's funny because I actually do that, but I put leaders in quotation marks because I don't consider them leaders. The thought and the idea behind this quote was we need to quit calling them leaders because they're not leaders, they're representatives. And I agree. When I say leaders and I put it in quotation marks, it's sarcasm because they're not leading us. Unfortunately, they are in leadership positions, but they're really not leading us. And the reason why they're not leading us is because we don't hold them accountable. We are in a supposedly, and we can argue this. I stand firm on the fact that we are in a government by, for, and of the people. That was the way it was designed. We've gotten really, really far from that, but that is the case, and they are supposed to be representatives. And as representatives, they should lead us as we see fit. And that's not what's happening. But it's also, if you guys have listened to any of my stuff in the past, we're responsible for that. And what I'm trying to say is that we're responsible for it because we don't keep our eyes on stuff like this. So anyway, getting back to the list here, the next one come up is Mitt Romney. This dude is just a straight turd. He has been for a long time, and it's gotten worse. Some of the quotes that I heard, some of the footage, video that I even saw and heard words come straight out of his mouth were just, if there's ever a Republican politician that should be ousted from the party, it's that guy. That dude is just not even, he's, in my opinion, he's a Democrat, and he's basically, what do they call that, a Trojan horse or whatever, when I don't remember, he's basically in the wrong party. He's just there as a detractor or something. I mean, it doesn't make any sense any other way. So his term ends in 2025. We'll see whether he decides to seek re-election or not. Ben Sasse of Nebraska is not running for re-election. And then we come to Pennsylvania, our own state, the state that I reside in. Senator Pat Toomey, who's also not running for re-election. And the point that I want to make about these people that aren't running for re-election, I think it's fair that when you watch what they do, and when you watch what they have done, if they really ever voted for any conviction, and I'm going to say that from what I recall of Pat Toomey, watching him a little closer than the others, he never really has stood on his own. It's always been, and party lines and stuff and such, but he's never really he's never really had any real balls about anything. And for him to have real balls all of a sudden just speaks to his character in my mind. So again, I think he's a traitor to the Republican Party, and in my opinion, he's a traitor to America. So, it's a good thing he's not running for re-election. If I had things my way, people like this would be painted also with a brush as a traitor. They would go down in history's books, and they would have focus on these sort of things because, the current state of America is in such bad shape. I feel like everything that took place through this impeachment and the last one, but specifically this one, is just too. I'm probably less disappointed and upset by the impeachment trial than I am by what is being ignored, and perhaps we'll get to that here a little bit. But I want to get back to Pat Toomey here. There was a quote in the article that said, "No president or anyone else has the First Amendment right to incite a violent attack on our government." Now, clearly that was a quote from Pat Toomey. in regards to his beliefs on how Trump incited this insurrection. And, when I see that quote in print, it causes me to stop and just kind of analyze it a little bit. No president or anyone else has a First Amendment right. Yes, they do. They have a First Amendment right, period, without exception. Doesn't mean there aren't consequences, and some would argue that this is the consequence for him exercising his First Amendment right. But either way, the fact that a politician can't differentiate and say, he does have the right, but these are the consequences. Okay, but he was acquitted, so clearly it was all a sham. Anyway, but to incite, the part that bugs me, aside from the fundamental breakdown of it, is the right to incite a violent attack on our government. First, he's accusing him of inciting. I don't believe he incited anything. In order for me to believe that he was responsible is to say that the people who actually acted out on January 6th are not responsible. And that's not adequate, that's not accurate, it's not fair, and it's not what this country was built on. Our mothers all told us, if somebody tells you to jump off a bridge, are you going to do it? It's your responsibility to make the choice. But the other thing that stands out with that quote to me is incite a violent attack on our government. I do believe, again, I'm not going to quote it because I don't memorize it by heart or anything, but I do believe that there is language in the Constitution that says that when the government is out of line, when the government is out of whack, when the government is falling out of line with the Constitution, we the people do have a right to rise. Not only a right, but a duty, as I believe the words say. So, that's actually getting to the point that I want to make about all this. But first, I'm following notes here. If you're noticing that my eyes are coming down. And I did it in a certain order, so I want to stick to it. But I promise it'll all wrap up. Later on in the article, there was another Cassidy quote from Bill Cassidy, Louisiana. It said, "It was clear that Donald Trump wished that lawmakers be intimidated." Connecting this to what I just said about it being our duty to rise when the government has fallen out of line with the Constitution, I don't really have a problem. And I remember saying that on the 6th, is that I don't really have a problem with the intimidation. Again, saying that was Trump's cause, that was Trump's intention. That's all speculation and silliness. How would you go about proving that? You can't really prove someone's intentions. That was silly. But either way, I remember on the 6th, as the news media, the mainstream media was, I was watching. It was just so incredible watching the spin. Watching what I saw with my own eyes from 3 different mainstream media networks and one of these so-called right-wing media networks. Even the right-wing one was starting to spin it to a certain degree, and I think it was just due to the uncertainty and maybe even covering their own ass and saying, hey, if this turns out to be something really bad, we don't want to be so obviously biased that, Anyway, but I remember watching all this, and I was like, clearly there are people inside acting up. We didn't get a whole lot of footage on that, but what we did see was we saw tens of thousands of people staying out front, staying on the... at the front, standing on the steps, even going up towards and to the doors, but not going in. And I remember saying, this is good. This is, I didn't really like that people went in. I didn't know, and I still don't know, don't understand the circumstances or anything like that, so I'm not really going to pass judgment on it. One thing's for shit sure, the media is not really pushing out anything. Where are these videos that they had for this trial? We don't get to see those, so how are we supposed to believe that our representatives, that our politicians are even being fair or honest, But that's what I said, was like, okay, this is what's supposed to be happening. We're a population of people who are sick and tired of what's going on. Sick and tired of being told that we're stupid, that we don't have to understand, we just have to go along with what they say. And this is why the people were there, and they were all standing there. And like I said, if tens of thousands of people wanted to wreck that place, that building would not be standing today. That's why I've had a problem with the word insurrection. That's why I've had a problem with the word riot. Any of that silliness that's been spun by the media is because it's what it is. It's silliness. What they were trying to do, what the vast majority were trying to do, was to intimidate. And I don't have a problem with that, because here's what I'm going to say. Right along with Pat Toomey's comment, the issue that I took with Pat Toomey's comment being that we do have a constitutional right and a duty to rise when our government is out of line with our Constitution. Of course, we're going to meet resistance from our government because they've been in power for so long, but eventually we have a duty to protect ourselves and our own government and our own Constitution. Even if our own government goes astray, that is our responsibility. That's something that Americans need to understand. But intimidation is not necessarily a bad thing. And if anything, I would like to say that our government is probably where it's at because they're not intimidated. They're not worried in the least. And you need to ask yourself why. I know why, or at least I have, a general idea of why, and that is because most Americans are really passive. We're just like, well, as long as it doesn't affect my life too much now, well, little by little, it's affected your life for decades. And what we're seeing right now is the end result of all those decades. So I don't have a problem with even if Trump's intentions were for legislators to be intimidated. Okay, I stand on what I said. I think that they need to be a little more intimidated. They need to be a little more concerned about, what their future and what their careers hold for them if they continue doing what they're doing. I think as of right now, they pretty much just practice however they see fit, and they do feel untouchable because, by and large, they pretty much are. So, there's another Cassidy quote here. And this is going to start tying things up because I've got some closing comments shortly after this. This video is now crested 20 minutes. I swear to God, I'm going to get these under 15 and hopefully up down around 10 at some point. But this last Cassidy quote says, "I think his force wanes," referring to Donald Trump's impact on the American people. He says, "I think his force wanes. The Republican Party is more than just one person." I don't think his force wanes. I think that comment proves that the government as a whole, but even more surprisingly, the Republican Party is dismissing more than 70 million voters, more than 70 million Americans, just completely dismissing us. Just like they'll get over it. This whole thing will blow over. His impact will wane. I think it's what's the word? That sort of bravado, that sort of cockiness proves what I said a little bit ago. They feel like they're untouchable. They don't have to represent us once they're in position. Once they've gotten their seat, they don't have to anymore. And it's comments like that that prove it. I think it's the opposite. I think that this is waking up a lot of people. And I think that this is not going to go away. But the thing that I want to, the closing statement that I think I'm going to end it on this, is I don't see this as Trump's cause. Going back to my initial statement, nobody's going to paint me as a Trump supporter. That is not my primary MO. That is not my objective, is to be a Trump supporter. I'm standing up for what I believe in at this point in time, and that is that our government has just hopefully concluded a 4-year witch hunt on a man who, absolutely was imperfect, had some things that I remember too many times saying, God, I just wish he'd shut the hell up. Just the stuff that would come out of his mouth was just, it wasn't helping anything. No matter what his intentions or his causes or what I believed that he stood for or anything like that. Some of the stuff that he has said, anyway, it doesn't matter. Just like I'm not willing to allow anybody to paint me with that Trump brush. I also think that in closing this, that this is not Trump's cause. I see this as the people's cause. And Trump was just the guy that was carrying the torch, And if another candidate stands up and says anything about draining the swamp, I mean, yeah, he needs to know that the resistance that the witch hunt that just took place for Trump is what he's going to face as well, he or she. Hell, I'd like to see Candace, what's her name? I can't remember what her last name is now. I think Candace Owens, I think, maybe something. I don't know. I'd like to see her do it. But that's what she's going to be up against. But what she's also going to have, she's going to have 70 million Americans in her pocket just to start. And I think that's something that, I've referenced a couple times in some written posts and some other videos, that there's a major issue that's being ignored right now with all this silliness, with the witch hunt as it was, the impeachment, the second impeachment trial being the absolute silliest waste of time. But even in mainstream media spinning up their stories, and even as Democrats have hypocritically lambasted people for things that they themselves have done, and we've seen it, we've all seen it, but we can't see one of them ever answer for that. They never take accountability, and I think that's a big problem. But that's not the biggest problem. That problem is the reason. It's stuff like that that is the reason we have the biggest problem. And the biggest problem that we have right now is that it's not just 70 million. I know that there are a bunch of people that voted for Biden. There was a bunch of, whether they voted for Biden or against Trump, as I did in 2004 or 16, voting against somebody. That's what I'm saying, is it's more than 70 million. There is a huge portion of this country who is absolutely tired of our government and how it's operating, and you don't see anybody mentioning that. That is when we tune in and we listen to the talking heads, the politicians that have gotten so good at saying one thing and doing another. You don't even see them you don't see them. I just said we don't see them taking accountability for things that they've done. They can't stand, as somebody like you or I, a regular person, would say, I think what's going on is wrong, but I did the same thing, and I'm not going to pass judgment because I did, I got caught up in the moment too. When you humble yourself and hold yourself accountable, and you recognize that you are a flawed individual, all of a sudden you're not quite so harsh on other people, and because it just, what you're seeing from the Democrats right now is just this huge self-righteousness. It's just disgusting. Nobody's that good. Nobody's that great, and we see it. We have the evidence right in front of us, but they won't own it. So that's one of the problems. But the bigger problem is that none of them are even mentioning. Like, you don't hear anybody saying, "Geez, we have a problem. We have a huge portion, if not half or greater than the population of our country, that does not trust our government, that is sick and tired of how our government is running." You don't hear that. If we had a government right now that was actually by, for, and of the people, if they were us, if they were actual representatives of us, if they were actually real people like us, somebody would have said that by now. Somebody would have said, this is a problem, and if I want to have a continued career in politics, if I want to continue feeling like, at the end of the day, when I look at myself in the mirror while I'm brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed, did I do the best job I possibly could? If I want to do those things, boy, we're going to have to recognize that we're responsible. Personal accountability. We're responsible for creating an atmosphere in this country where our constituents, our people, do not trust us. Let that sink in. But go ahead and just take a look at those 7 Republicans. Last thing I want to say, though, is that I think it's foolish on both sides for anybody to assume that Donald Trump was a Republican. Donald Trump was not a Republican. Unfortunately, Donald Trump, he knew what he had to do. He had to align himself with one of the two supported political parties in our current garbage 2-party system. So he did what he had to do, but I guess I would have liked to have seen Republicans back then say, no, he's not really one of us, but we'll work with him. I would have liked to have him say the same thing. I'm not really a Republican. I guess we really can't accept that kind of, or expect that kind of open honesty from a politician. So anyway, folks, that's it right there. This is going to be right at about a half an hour, and I'm sorry for that, but I feel like it was something that was pretty important, and I hope it got you to thinking. Follow me on MeWe. I won't be on Facebook anymore, or you can find me on my YouTube channel. Have a good one, guys.